This tutorial will show you how to service your threadless headset on your bicycle. The step-by-step guide is in the video description below this video. Hey there, BikeBlogger here. Today we're going to clean the headset on my Diamondback Honjo Comp bicycle. The headset is here, so we're going to get at it. First thing we'll do is remove the front wheel. This is a quick release front wheel here, so all I got to do is pull on this thing, this lever here, loosen it up a little bit, and the wheel should pop right out, just like that. Alright, so step 2 now is to remove the brake caliper from the fork, which is right here. We need to remove this brake caliper. You got 2 bolts here, they're 5mm, so we'll just come down here and we will loosen these bolts and take off the brake caliper. If there are any washers, just be careful not to lose them. Alright, so the brake caliper now is removed off of the front fork here. Now remember, with the disc brake, do not squeeze the brake lever, otherwise you could mess up the adjustment of your brake pads. So it's probably a good idea to stick something between them so they hold their place, something clean. Now this brake is still attached to this fork here because there's this little guide here. Actually, it's just a zip tie on my bike. I'm going to go ahead and snap the zip tie just like that, and I will remove it, so get it out of the way there. So now the brake is totally disengaged from the front fork. Now I also have one other cable attached to the front fork that could get in the way, and that is my bike computer wire, which is right here, the sensor. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this off of the fork as well. The only other thing on the front fork right now is my fender here. It attaches to this bolt right here onto the fork, but nothing else is attached to the fender. There's no cables obviously coming from a rain fender on a bike. So we can just go ahead and leave this on here. Alright, so now that I got the front wheel removed and the brake caliper detached from the fork, I can leave the fender on, and I got my bike computer sensor detached from the fork. We can go ahead and start working on the headset up here. We'll remove the top cap. It uses a 4mm Allen key, and all we got to do is just loosen this up and take it all the way off. Now I want to keep track of the order things come off, so it's good to have a nice clean surface somewhere and just start laying it out bit by bit so you can keep track of the order. Now before I go further, I don't want the fork to drop out unexpectedly, so I'll use an elastic band like a rubber band or a bungee cord or some old inner tube here, old bicycle inner tube, just to hold it in place so it doesn't fall out. So just simply wrap it around the head tube and the fork there. And that should just hold it in place. Alright, so the next step is to remove any headset spaces you might have had above the stem. Note the size and number of them and go ahead and set them down next to the top cap so you're keeping track of stuff. I don't have any, so I don't need to worry about that. Next step then is to loosen the stem bolts here. The stem is clamping on to the fork steerer tube. That's why we got this elastic band down here. So now we just go ahead and lift the stem off of the fork steerer tube like that. Now we can set the handlebars down somewhere, like maybe on the down tube here. Alright. Alright, so the next step is to remove your headset spaces. We got a whole bunch of them here, so I'm just going to take them off. Just remember how many you got and the size of them. I'm just going to go ahead and set this down now. Keeping track of the order of things here. So the next step now is to remove the fork, push the fork out. So I'm going to go ahead and hold it with my hand underneath here and go ahead and take this off now. This is really just a precautionary thing. You probably don't need to do what I did there with that elastic band. So push the fork out now. Now my fork is being a little, I think it needs a little encouragement. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it on the top here with a rubber mallet. It's coming, and you can see it looks really nasty down in there. Let's keep pushing it out. Okay, so it's coming out. There we go. We have removed the fork now. So what are we looking at, BikeBlogger? You can see this fork steer tube is tapered, just like the head tube here. We're dealing with a tapered fork. These are the lower bearings right here. Looks like they're just simply loose ball bearings. And this is the fork crown race down in there. So yeah, we're going to clean all this up and reinsert. Now if you look at this fork steer tube, you look down here. I'm not sure if the camera can really see very well, but if you look down there, you see a star-shaped nut. Sometimes they call it a star-fangled nut. That's what is used to preload the headset bearings. Alright, so now that we got the fork out, next step is to remove the top bearing cover. That was easy. It's just a cover. That's basically it. I'm going to set this down now next to our other stuff, keeping track of things. So the next step is just go ahead and remove the bottom bearing, which is right on here actually. Just go ahead and take it off. So what I want to do is degrease these bearings and dry them and then grease them back up. And what you can do now is you can sort of look at them closely, see if the bearings look pitted or worn. Next step is we're going to go ahead and remove the top bearing. Let's keep track of everything that's on here. Looks like we got a washer. Alright. This is actually the seal for the bearings. And actually it looks like we do have a little sort of a compression device here, as it turns out. So we'll just go ahead and remove all these pieces, keeping track of them. We're going to clean this up. Now notice how I'm laying everything out here. This is going to be the bottom bearing. So I got all my top bearing stuff laid out up here, and I got all pointed upward in the way that it all sort of goes onto the bike. By that I mean this is facing up, this is facing up, this is facing up. So it all sort of goes on, like first this goes down, and this goes on top of it, and then the top cap goes on top of that. Alright, so that's how I'm laying everything down here. All these spacers and the top bearing cover. And for the bottom bearing, just sort of laying it down here. So top bearing stuff's going up here, bottom bearing stuff is going to go there. So this goes for the top bearing. Let's clean this up. Alright, so here are my bearings, the top bearings. We're going to go ahead and pull those out. So here you go. As you can tell, the ball bearings here, they point downward against the surface in which it's working against. So the ball bearings, the smooth round surface of the balls, they point down toward the frame. And when it's on the bottom, the bottom bearings, they point this way, up toward the frame. It's always up toward the frame. That's the direction in which the balls are facing. Because you can tell both sides are not the same. You get the balls on this side is just flat. So, you know, the flat, nice, smooth interface is just, you know, aesthetically, you know, if you want to think of it that way, it's on the outward section. The inward section is where all the magic happens. That's where these balls are facing in toward. So, as you can tell, these bearings here, for the top bearings on the headset, these are smaller. Or the ring, the caged ring of these bearings is smaller than the bottom bearings right here. I think the balls, the ball bearings themselves might be slightly smaller, and the ring of them is definitely smaller. You definitely have less of them on this tapered head tube, tapered headset setup that we're dealing with. So once we're done, you know, cleaning these things off, again, you could also, you know, use some solvent. Be careful with the solvent. You use degreaser to really, you know, really clean them up. You know, better than just using like a rag like I'm doing. Get all that, basically just want to get all that old grease off and flush the surfaces completely. So let's take a closer look at the head tube. This needs to be cleaned up in here and greased. I ride this bike in the rain and through mud sometimes, and in the snow and ice and saltwater roads. So obviously it does take a toll on a bike. Let's not forget to clean the fork while we got it out. So let's go ahead and clean off the fork. This beautiful thing here is the fork crown race. Go ahead and clean that off. Now that we got everything sort of cleaned up here, looking a little more shiny again, we're going to put new grease on, fresh grease. You can use any type of grease, you know, really that's bicycle grease I recommend. You can use the Park Tool. This is Park Tool PPL-1. You can also use Finish Line, Teflon grease here. Got a whole jar of this stuff, so we'll just go ahead and use this. So we'll just go ahead and grease the race here on the fork. I'm going to grease the races on the head tube here as well. Just getting some grease down here in the race. Plenty of grease is just fine. We're going to get some grease in the bottom race here of the head tube of the bike as well. Don't worry about it looking all messy. It's all going to be hidden away. You won't be able to see it. Let's go ahead and grease the top bearing here. I just got a huge glob of grease here. We're just going to go all the way around. I got probably too much grease here. That's all right. It's going to get messy. Use some gloves. Don't want to get all that Teflon stuff on you anyway. Alright, if I can still see it. Don't need a ridiculous amount of grease, but I always say you can't have too much grease. Alright, we're going to go ahead and drop these in to the bike now. We're going to have the rounded edge of the bearings, the ball bearings, facing down in there, like that. Go, nice and messy. Let's see what's going on there. Now we'll grease the bottom bearing. How long should it take you to do this whole process of servicing your headset? You know, You know, cleaning it, re-greasing it, taking it all apart, putting it back together. You know, if you've done it a few times, it probably shouldn't take you much longer than 15 minutes, honestly. If it's the first time you ever done this, it might take you 2 to 4 times longer. It might take you 30 to 60 minutes to do all this if you've never done it before, you know. But that's why I'm here. That's why the Bike Blogger is here, to sort of help you out. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put this on the fork now. Again, this is the bottom bearing. The rounded edge, again, points up. So it goes up into the frame like that. So the flat edge goes down. We'll put it onto the fork steer tube just like that. We'll rest it against the crown race there of the fork. Make sure it's down and on here all the way evenly. If it doesn't get on there completely evenly, your headset might become a little loose. You'll just have to retighten it later, that's all. No big deal. So that's all there is to it. Now we just reassemble the bike, basically. We don't have any other lower bearing stuff. All we really had were the bearings. We got all these different components for the top part of the bearing. We got this, again, we got this sort of seal, this sort of washer, presses down against the bearings. We got this little compression device, I think it is, of some sort. We got a top bearing cover. We got our headset spacers at the top, and we got our top cap. So we're just going to go ahead and slip the fork back through the head tube of the bicycle frame and reinstall each one of these one by one. Just slip them on. Boom, 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 boom. So real easy. All right, so we're going to slip our fork back through. Of course, make sure it's oriented the right direction. It doesn't go in like this, obviously. It goes on like this. So just go ahead and slip the fork back through now. Nice. All right. Now you obviously got to hold the fork here, unless you're going to, get an elastic band again to hold it up. So now let's just get our pieces one by one. I actually got them sitting over here. I didn't mention this before. Probably should mention it. With this little seal, this rubber-looking washer thing. Generally, whenever you have like a washer or something that looks like a seal, you should never touch the inside edge of the seal. You could contaminate it, and it will degrade it over time. Don't touch it with your hands. Don't touch it with a tool, because all that stuff's contaminated. You're contaminated, so don't touch it. Obviously, I'm trying not to touch it. I'm not being super careful though, but I thought I'd just throw it out there. Let's go ahead and slip it on now. Next is our little compression device thing here. Slips on like this. Goes down in there like that. Next thing is my hands are all greasy. Bearing top cover. Slip it on there like that. Let's put our headset spacers on. So we put the handlebars back on, just as they were, like that. All right, almost there. I can go ahead and tighten the stem bolts just a little bit. I'm going to put the top cap on. That's the last thing. Screw this down. We're not going to screw it down tight. We're just going to very lightly screw it onto here, so it basically just doesn't fall off on us. I'll just go ahead and remove any excess grease that's sort of sticking out in places. You can do this earlier. You just don't want it laying out anywhere, because sticking out anywhere, because bugs and stuff are going to get stuck to it and your bike's going to get dirty real quick. Go ahead and reinstall the brake caliper as it was. All right, so now we'll just go ahead and reinstall the front wheel here. quick tip, if you do have any disc brake rubbing, which I did have, I just fixed it, but if you do have any disc brake rubbing when you're reinstalling your disc brake caliper here, all you got to do is, with these bolts loose, don't touch anything, just with the bolts loose, squeeze the front brake caliper and then tighten the bolts. You don't need to hold the brake caliper up against the fork. At least usually you do not. You just leave it a little loose, each bolt a little loose, squeeze the front brake caliper, tighten down the bolts, and it should work itself out. See, my front disc brake works just perfectly, even after taking everything off. Spin the wheel. It's silent. Squeeze the front brake. You hear that little rattle going through the frame of the bike. That means the headset's loose. We're going to set all that, make sure everything's straight and tight just right. So let's take the bike down off the bike stand. So I'm straddling the bike right now, like I'm, sitting on the bike. And we got two things we want to do. We want to make sure the handlebars are straight with the front wheel. So what we're going to do is we're just going to loosen everything up here. Let's loosen up the stem bolts. Actually, before I do that, let's bounce the bike. Hear that really loud rattling noise? That's because everything's not tight on here correctly. We'll do that second. But first we'll loosen the stem bolts. Go ahead and loosen the top cap now too if we want. Let's go ahead and line up by just moving it like this and down here like this. Not sure if you can see that with my crazy camera angle. Now, before we tighten up the stem bolts though, let's go ahead and tighten up this headset top cap. That's what sets our preload, which is basically how tight our bearings are pressing against the bearing surfaces on our bike. So let's go ahead and tighten down this top cap just a little bit. It needs to be just snug. It doesn't need to be tight, just tight enough that it doesn't create any rattling noises when you bounce the bike. So now we'll go ahead and tighten up the stem bolts here. The stem bolts again are just for connecting basically the handlebars and the stem to the fork. So it keeps everything together, but it has nothing to do really with the headset, except for the fact you got to loosen these bolts to be able to adjust the preload on the headset. So we tighten the bolts down. Now let's go ahead and bounce the bike. I got some cable here for my bike computer still hanging out. We'll have to do last, but sounds pretty good. Doesn't sound nearly as loud. We'll go ahead and grab a hold of the front brake lever here, which will make it so we can't go forward with the bike. And we'll push the bike back and forth, and we're going to feel through the handlebars, through the frame, our fingers are going to feel whether there's any sort of play. I don't think there really is any sort of knocking noise. It seems pretty good to me. So I think we might just go with this. If we wanted to, if it was a little loose still, again, we loosen the stem clamp bolts here. Again, there's two of them. You want to tighten them when you're done evenly. Why do you want to tighten all these bolts evenly when I say that? It's because you want to distribute the stress on each bolt evenly, so one is not, more stressed than the other. Are you going to be able to get it exact? Absolutely not, but you can get pretty close. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten down this bolt just a little more. All right. Now we're going to tighten down the stem bolts again. So we just tightened the top cap bolt there a little bit more. Again, that top cap has to do with the headset and nothing else really. So tighten down our stem bolts again. Go ahead and grab the front brake lever and rock it back and forth. that sounds real good. What do I mean by that? There's absolutely no rattling noise, no knocking noise. All I can hear really is just the front wheel scraping back and forth against this beautiful cardboard I got down on the ground. So there's absolutely no play, so that's great. What if I bounce the bike? Nice and quiet. All I really hear is the rattling of my my beautiful rain fenders down there making noise. So what is the last thing? Well, you want to make sure the headset is not too tight. And by that I mean when you steer with the handlebars, you don't feel any grinding. It needs to be nice and smooth, so. Because basically what will happen is if you feel a grinding sensation, it's just going to prematurely wear down the bearings, and you're going to have to replace the bearings sooner. So you don't want it too tight either. So if you still feel a grinding, especially if you feel a quite strong grinding feeling as you're going back and forth after you've done this overhaul, it's time to replace the bearings. What size bearings do you need? You can measure them with a caliper, and then you could buy them online, or just take them to your local bike shop and they can hook you up. So yeah, if it's still causing you issues, you need to replace the bearings. Simple as that. And honestly, if you're going to go through all this trouble for a first time, and it's going to probably take you longer than future times, you might as well measure your bearings, so then in the future if you do need to replace them, you'll have them already on hand. Just a quick tip. Alright, so I got the bike back up here in the work stand. Again, we just want to make sure there's no grease hanging out anywhere. Make sure everything's nice and clean. How much time you want to spend on cleaning your bike and re-greasing it and everything depends on you. I'm a bike commuter. I'm not a racer or anything. I don't baby my bikes. I really, beat them up quite a bit, and they just got to take it because that's the way I roll. So we just cleaned off the rest of the bike there. I need to reinstall my sensor for my bike computer. Now, did I need to take all this stuff off? Depends on you. You might be able to lay it like I showed you. You might be able to lay it down onto the down tube of the bike. So I reinstalled the bike wired sensor here onto the fork blade, so it lines up with my wheel magnet right here. Just need to make sure that my speedometer is still working, so we'll spin the wheel. Make sure see it's picking up the speed, 7.2 miles per hour, 7.0, 6.8 miles per hour. So it's still working. Of course, make sure you can still turn your handlebars all the way, as far as you could before at least. Make sure nothing's going to catch and cause you trouble. Nothing's going to go into the spokes. So always give your wheel a couple of good spins. Make sure the brakes are still working. And I think that pretty much completes our headset servicing. This has been an overview and step-by-step guide to servicing your Threadless headset. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe this video. See you next time.